Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're doing something super cool. We are effectively unboxing a 2,000-year-old text, but right off the bat, I want you to completely throw away any idea of this being some dusty, irrelevant religious artifact. Seriously, toss that out. The Mahāniddesa, which is the 21st book of the Theravāda Buddhist canon, functions way less like an ancient scripture and much, much more like a hardcore cognitive operating manual for the modern mind. In this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how this incredible text decodes the literal mechanics of human suffering, desire, and, well, human society itself. Okay, let's dive into this. 16. Just 16. That number actually represents the very humble beginnings of our source material today. Originally, there were just 16 brief, highly poetic verses, known as suttas, sitting in a section called the Aṭṭhakavagga. In their original form, these were really short, very artistic, and deeply metaphorical. They were undeniably beautiful, but, they left a ton of room for interpretation. But then, look at what happens. Those 16 short verses are dramatically expanded into this exhaustive, highly systematic, 400-plus page analytical behemoth. According to Theravada tradition, this massive expansion was the work of Sāriputta. He was one of the Buddha's chief disciples, totally renowned for his unmatched intellect and wisdom. He basically took those few poetic verses and put them right under a microscope, breaking them apart word by word, concept by concept. The result? Well, it's what academics call a laboratory of the mind. It actually holds this extremely rare elevated status known as a canonical commentary. And what that means is, it's an explanation so profoundly accurate that it was packed right into the official canon itself, treated with the exact same authority as the Buddha's own spoken words. No small feat, right? Section 1. Decoding the Mahāniddesa, Laboratory of the Mind. Section 2. Bridge. Poetry to Science. And this brilliantly illustrates the kind of bridge we're talking about here. On one side, you have the early poetic suttas, highly metaphorical, really focused on brevity, and relying a lot on art and intuition. On the completely opposite side, you have the analytical Abhidhamma. This is the later, highly systematic, incredibly dense scientific and psychological framework of Buddhism. The Mahāniddesa? It's the crucial missing link sitting right smack in the middle. It takes that early poetry and introduces this rigorous scientific analysis, basically establishing a brand new way to interpret philosophical and psychological truths. Section 3. Anatomy of Desire. Now, the Mahāniddesa doesn't just pat you on the back and tell you not to want things. It entirely redefines the actual anatomy of human desire. It splits the concept of desire, or kama, into two totally distinct parts. First up, we have vatukama. These are the external tempting objects themselves. Think of, a luxury car, a piece of chocolate, or actually, let's say your smartphone. Then we have kilesakama. This is the internal mental defilement, the actual psychological craving and attachment happening inside your own head. So I've got to ask you, is your smartphone the trap or is your mind the trap? The radical ancient idea presented here is that the root of your suffering isn't caused by the object itself. The smartphone is literally just glass and metal. The suffering is entirely generated by kilesakama, that internal psychological process of mental attachment. Section 4. The Trap of Dogma. But the Mahāniddesa definitely doesn't stop at personal desire. Oh no, it scales right up into the mechanics of societal conflict. Think about it. Why do groups of people fight? Why do societies so bitterly divide? So the crucial point is a concept called ditthi, which basically translates to dogmatic views or really rigid opinions. The text viciously critiques this. It argues that clinging fiercely to views, claiming an absolute monopoly on the truth, and becoming so fiercely attached to specific belief systems is the absolute root of societal polarization. Guys, it is literally the ancient version of modern echo chambers. When we weaponize our beliefs and rigidly identify with our opinions, we are basically guaranteeing endless conflict and quarreling in human society. To counter all this societal chaos, the text presents a really fascinating ideal. They call it the Muni, or the enlightened sage. And what's incredible about the Muni is that they possess profound understanding, yet they explicitly do not fall under the power of any rigid view. Contrast that endless, noisy chaos of modern dogma and political polarization with the calm clarity of the Muni. True understanding, at least according to this ancient cognitive manual, doesn't actually require weaponizing your beliefs or constantly fighting to prove you're right. It requires stepping entirely outside the trap of ditthi. Section 5. Psychological Operating Manual. So we understand the traps of desire and we get the traps of dogma. But how do we actually fix these mental traps in real life? Well, the manual introduces the concept of kanachita. This is the view that your consciousness is not one solid, permanent state, but rather a super rapid, continuous stream of arising and passing mind moments. It's kind of like frames in a movie reel, right? Now, what's really interesting about this whole concept is that visualizing life as this fleeting series of micro-moments forms the absolute bedrock of Vipassana meditation. You aren't a fixed, permanent self that is angry. You are just experiencing rapidly changing micro-moments of anger that arise and then pass away. Seeing this impermanence, that's the master key to detaching from the pain. Let's move to the 3 seclusions, or viveka, and see how this builds into a highly practical roadmap for your own practice. Step 1 is kaya viveka, physical seclusion. This is literal. Find a quiet room, get away from the noise. Step 2 is chitta viveka, mental seclusion. Once your body is quiet, you quiet the mind, using that exact awareness of mind moments we literally just talked about. And finally, step 3 is upadhi viveka, the complete extinction of defilements, achieving ultimate psychological freedom or nirvana. It is a step-by-step, perfectly logical progression from literally just shutting your door, all the way to achieving total enlightenment. Before we wrap up, we absolutely have to look at the lasting legacy of the Mahāniddesa. Sāriputta's analytical method here, starting with Udesha, which is a brief summary, moving into Nidesha, a detailed exposition, and finally Patiniddesa, a further, deeper exposition, became the ultimate blueprint for all future Buddhist study. It deeply, deeply influenced later masterworks like the famous Visuddhimagga. It proves this wasn't just some one-off commentary. It laid down the permanent tracks for how psychological and philosophical analysis would be conducted for millennia. Which brings us to our final takeaway. 2,000 years ago, the Mahāniddesa broke down desire, societal conflict, and consciousness to force us to ask one incredibly simple question. Are we suffering because of the world around us or the world we build in our minds? By distinguishing the object from the craving and the actual truth from rigid dogma, this text invites you, right now, today, to start observing your own rapid-fire mind moments. Next time you feel stressed, angry, or overly attached, remember the Muni, remember Kilesa Kama, and really ask yourself, where is the suffering actually coming from? Thank you so much for exploring this totally fascinating operating manual of the mind with me. Keep observing and keep learning.